Hello everyone. Welcome to the 2015 Global Dialogue on Waste, and we're proud to be conducting our panel discussions consecutively for the third year to disseminate knowledge in waste management. As part of the 2015 Global Dialogue on Waste, we'll host a panel discussion every Wednesday until the end of December. Our next panel will discuss culture, consumption, and waste management. You can learn more about the time and other details of all upcoming panels by following us on social media or by subscribing to our newsletter. Today, our panel will explore the export of refuse-derived fuel, RDF. And you might want to know that in 2010, there was no export of RDF from UK. It was zero. But in the last 5 years, it has grown from 0 to 215,000 tons. Our panel will discuss the reasons behind this growth and the economics and sustainability of exporting RDF. We welcome you to join the live conversation with your questions and comments. You can use the live chat window on our homepage or tweet to us with hashtag WasteWise. If you're watching this video after its live broadcast, you can find recordings of all our panel discussions on our website, www.wastewise.be. Today, Adam Baddeley will give an introduction of himself and his work. Adam?
Hi everyone, thank you Ranjit. So I'm Adam Baddeley, I am Head of Energy at Eunomia Research and Consulting. I've been with Eunomia 9 years, I've been a consultant 16 years within the sector. I tend to lead all waste-related, all energy-related work at Eunomia, including our work on RDF. Eunomia is a business of about 60 consultants within the UK. We have our head office in Bristol. We also have offices in London and shortly Manchester, and we also have an office in Brussels. A particular note for this panel discussion. We are a secretariat to what is known as the RDF Industry Export Group, which is a group of 20 organisations ranging from some of the large UK waste contractors through to a number of overseas processors of RDF. We are responsible for forming that group, and a report, an evidence-based report developed on behalf of that group is to be published shortly. I should make it clear, however, that the views presented that I'll talk about today and present today are my own, albeit it may draw upon some of the work done for that group. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, great. Stephen, would you like to go next? Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Stephen Wise. I'm a principal consultant with Ricardo-AEA. I've been in the sector for 20 years. Most of that has been working for private waste management companies, including Suez and Shanks and Chimentia Holdings. So I've got a knowledge of the operating and production side of RDF. I've been involved with its use within the UK and its export. And more recently, I've joined Ricardo-AEA, where I have a role helping to develop the private sector clients and deliver work on their behalf, and I'm the leading person within Ricardo to deal with RDF and SRF, as well as a number of other waste-related subjects. And Ricardo is a multidisciplinary consultancy. We have offices throughout the world with our parent company. We're based in Shoreham. Ricardo-AEA, which is the part I am part of, is based in Harwell in Oxfordshire, and we have about 80 consultants based within the UK.
Great. Both very good consulting firms. And to start with the questions that we have, like I mentioned, there's been a rapid growth in the last 5 years. From 0 in 2010 to 2,015 tons in 2015, and even the number of companies which are involved in RDF export and import are increasing considerably. What do you think are the main driving factors behind this, Adam?
Well, certainly, I mean, changes in legislation enabled export of RDF, I think, from about 2011. And the sort of and essentially we started to see export of RDF from around that time. And I guess what's been the real driver has been the rising cost of landfill, driven by the landfill tax, which was going up by £8 per tonne per year, up to the current level of, I think it's about £82, rising with inflation. I can't remember whether it's CPI or RPI, but that drove the market towards cheaper cost alternatives. The primary one of which was exporting RDF to other EU member states. Things have grown. I mean, the market has grown pretty exponentially within that time, and I guess, you know, again, that's been driven by the cost of landfill, but also to some extent, albeit the situation is changing. Previously, a lack of spare capacity within UK facilities for treating waste within the UK.
Interesting. And Stephen, agree with those, or anything else to add?
No, I think in broad terms, I completely agree with it. And you know, up until last year, I was, say, manufacturing RDF, and one of the reasons we started the export from the northwest with the company I was with was because of the cost of landfill, and it was much more competitive for us to actually send that for recovery abroad in facilities there. But I think, you know, one of the driving factors behind that is not just the cost of landfill in this country, but also that capacity became available on the European continent, you know, driven partly by the recession and lower waste arisings, and a change in some of the practices there. So their, you know, capacity opened up at those energy from waste facilities, and for them, a lot of them are funded by the authorities. They could, you know, provide a gate fee that was a very good price, which is why we saw that market develop. So as Adam says, it's come very much hand in hand with, you know, with the cost of landfill here, and then this market opening up in Europe. And I think, you know, at the moment as well, until the cost of some of the UK gate fees for waste to energy start to fall, we'll continue to see that export market.
Interesting. So, well, and capacity in countries outside UK, and of course, a lack of capacity in the UK.
Yeah.
Right. And to the audience, I forgot mentioning that Mr. Dirk Lechtenberg is unable to join us because he had to be admitted to the hospital. So we regret that. And if we have any information that he'd like to share about this topic, we'll put that up on Wastewise. So follow us. And coming back to the panel. So. Well, you've been talking about a lack of capacity in the UK. Is that still the case now, and or what are the future trends for that? Adam, maybe you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, I think those who've read our reports will know that certainly we take the view that things are changing or will change relatively rapidly in that sense. Albeit, you know, I think currently we have about a further 5 million tonnes of incineration capacity, energy from waste capacity, whatever you want to call it, under construction now, or which has reached financial close. That will, to some extent, mop up, you know, some of the remaining residual waste that is available. If you look at it, we certainly think that we're going to see an further increase in rates, which again reduces the amount of tonnage available. Therefore, at the margin, you're going to have potentially, at the moment, you have sort of that which is going to export is essentially being taken out of landfill. We may see, we think, in the coming years, a situation where you have overseas facilities competing with UK facilities for tonnage, which, you know, may start to see you know, some competitive tension in terms of gate fee. Well, I think currently the overseas facilities need to outcompete landfill. They're broadly not competing with domestic energy from waste facilities. So, but that situation we think will change perhaps in the next sort of 2 to 5 years.
Thank you. And Stephen, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, as Adam says, that in the future there's going to be some well-placed competitive tensions in terms of gate fees. But as an operator last year, even with some local facilities that had come online, we were not seeing the facilities within the UK offer a competitive price, which still made it advantageous for us to export abroad. And some of the facilities in the UK, have had contracts or financing closed at certain rates. They've got to try and achieve their paybacks, etc., make sure that the finances are in order. So one or two may be limited in terms of how competitive they can be, and I think that's going to be an increasing feature as we develop new energy from waste infrastructure in the UK. They're going to have to look at their commercial models and the sort of prices they're going to be charging, which may make it an interesting area for future investment.
Interesting. So there is capacity in the UK, but they're unable to provide competitive prices. What is a competitive price in the UK that would, use the RDF within UK?
It depends on, a lot of it depends on the quality. Certain qualities you will get a much lower price because there are specific uses for it, be it in industrial processes such as cement production or other industrial processes. For very, I'll call it low quality RDF, i.e. material that may just have been shredded, may have had some metals removed. It very much resembles a more generic MSW, municipal solid waste. You can be in the sort of the £80 a tonne or higher for energy from waste capacity. And look at when we were placing material into the market last year, we couldn't get below sort of £80 a tonne in the UK for material. We could get it into the continent for £70 to £75 a tonne. So there was an advantageous benefit to still exporting it. So the gap is closing, and it needs to close a bit more for the UK market to develop a better level of infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. So this is majorly economic. It's dependent on economics. That's what it looks like. Are there any regulatory drivers behind this, Adam?
I mean, I think I'll come on to I mean, just to comment further on the economics, I'll come on to regulation in a minute, if I may. I mean, in terms of the economics, I mean, I largely agree with Stephen. I mean, I think the issue is the transport costs. I mean, the actual gate fee costs, at the gate are a lot cheaper, effectively, on the continent. I think Steve may have mentioned before, a lot of the capital investment has been paid off on plants operating in the Netherlands and Germany and some in Sweden. It's just getting the material to those outlets, which can raise the cost considerably. But as a whole, you've also got sort of baling and shredding costs potentially to take into consideration as well. So that sort of packaged up along with TFS, trans-frontier shipments, administrative costs can considerably add to the cost. Albeit with all that included, those options can still be cheaper than UK. Sorry, go on.
No, you wanted to talk about regulatory drivers.
Yes, I mean regulatory. I mean, many hopefully listening to the discussion will be aware that the Environment Agency, or DEFRA, I should say, has consulted or issued a call for evidence on whether they should bring in any standards of any kind for RDF. I mean, I think ironically, perhaps it's been driven by I guess perceived links of RDF export to waste crime in the UK. There have been a number of abandonments of waste of significant tonnages, also of fires occurring with waste, which have been mistakenly linked to RDF export. Essentially, that all those have taken place in the UK and have been, often, TFS hasn't been in place. They have been basically the actions of unscrupulous operators within the UK. So that has sort of, I guess, driven driven the government to consult on whether on standards for RDF as a way, I guess, of stopping that kind of practice. I think. I mean, there'll certainly be some detail in the RDF export report that is published shortly, but I can't go into too much detail about that now. But we made a series of recommendations, or the group has, as to what approach might be taken by DEFRA and the Environment Agency, both in terms of the waste crime angle, which we don't think is connected to RDF export, but also consideration of standards for RDF, which I mean, I think certainly the agency is also being driven by wanting to move waste up the hierarchy, and rightly so. So to see more recycling and extraction of recyclable materials from residual waste. Certainly, I'm of the view that should be the goal, but we think that that should be addressed via source separation, not via trying to recover significant amounts of materials from residual waste, which can not only be very costly, but if government attempted to apply a requirement like that to RDF or to residual waste that was being processed into RDF for export, it would actually have to do the same for all residual waste, whether that was processed in the UK or overseas. And I don't think any operator in the UK wants to see that happen, that they would need to perform certain recovery actions prior to waste going into an energy from waste plant. I think my view is that pretty universally people will want to take those actions further up the supply chain and at source.
Right. Interesting. And Adam, you mentioned two different aspects which I'd like to come back to. One is the standardization, and the other one is the waste crime. So I'd like to ask Stephen about waste crime. Being having worked with exporter of RDF, can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between RDF export and waste crime, and also what kinds of waste crime can happen within the RDF export?
Yeah, I agree with Adam with this. It's not the waste crime, that there isn't a link between waste crime and export. It's not the export market. What we've seen is because of the ability to produce an RDF, we've seen criminal elements come into the UK or set up within the UK and take waste, process it, and then just store it and leave it. So they're actually taking advantage of loopholes in the regulation in terms of how it's enforced, or the penalties that are there to discourage companies from doing this. So, for the companies that are exporting, then they're doing it responsibly. They're actually doing that properly. They're following all the regulations. They're not the ones that are causing the worry. It's these companies that step in, will just take the material and then leave it somewhere, or things get set on fire. And we've seen a lot of those incidences. But it's by tightening up the overall regulations around RDF, and that's not just export, that's RDF production, and having suitable penalties or discouragements in place that will prevent companies from getting away with this, that will solve the problem. The RDF export market is generally run very well, and there is a lot of protection that goes on in terms of the environment protection, things having to be wrapped properly to prevent odor, to prevent flies. We still see issues that occur because unfortunately that's a part of operations, and people sometimes get it wrong. They don't always mean to. They sometimes get it wrong and then look to correct it. But the waste crime is just being driven because of seeing a gap in the market, the cost of landfill, the cost of disposal, and a criminal element taking advantage of it.
So I don't quite understand it, being someone from outside the UK. How does taking waste and leaving it somewhere benefit these criminals?
Do you want to take that, Stephen, or shall I sort of just quickly talk?
No, go ahead, Adam. Right. Yeah.
I mean, you'll an operator or a transfer station will take a gate fee for waste. So let's say they offer they think, well, okay, they'll take an £80 gate fee, let's say, I mean, in some cases, I mean, I think there is certainly a criminal element, but in some cases, you know, it may be operators almost at the outset in good faith taking waste in at a gate fee, but thinking that they will be able to get, you know, pass that waste on at another gate fee, which gives them a margin to do whatever they want to do to that waste. But essentially, there's money to be made if you've got a gate fee. If you've taken 10,000 tonnes of waste at £80 a tonne, there's a nice £800,000 there for you, for example. And you can sit, as Stephen said, you can sit on that waste for a certain amount of time. You can sit on it for a long time, the way things are currently set up, and hold on to that money. And actually, if you end up burning it, liquidating the company, you've made a nice bit of money, provided you're not prosecuted. So, as I said, it's not necessarily a criminal element, albeit there are criminal elements there. It could be that an operator's taken in that tonnage, it thinks that it's going to be able to, you know, add a bit of value to that waste, as it were, or to extract some recyclables. It might think it's then going to be able to pass that waste on for a gate fee of only £60, so it makes a margin on that £20. At the same time, that the export price or a particular outlet, the prices could have gone up, so it's not able to make any money on that waste, or in fact make a loss. So it makes a decision, I guess, to abandon or set fire to that waste. Mm-hmm. But again,
I was just going to say, I think one element that, Adam, that you've just mentioned that some of them haven't addressed properly is where they extract what they believe are valuable recyclates, be it metals, aluminium, some of the plastics. They've got it completely wrong in terms of the value that they're going to receive for those recyclates. You know, extracting the recyclate in a dirty form in this way makes, especially plastics and paper and cardboard, makes it very, very difficult to get an onward market with any value. And with things like Operation Green Fence in China, to make sure that the quality is right, you know, the agencies both in the UK and in receiving ports turning away low quality recyclates, then that element that operators thought was going to be, you know, cherry on the cake, they've got it completely wrong, and that's quite often where they've completely messed up their financials.
So let me understand this. So all the recyclates are sent to China, and the RDF is sent to continental Europe, is it?
Not quite that simple.
Well, I think Steve's right. I mean, so, you know, a lot of plastics and paper, for example, are sent to China or other countries, certainly in the Far East or sometimes South America, let's say. I mean, Stephen's right in that, you know, you're only really going to extract ferrous or non-ferrous metals from residual waste in terms of getting any value from those. You're likely, the plastics, unless you clean them up significantly, aren't really going to hold much value. And with quality requirements increasing in China, Stephen mentioned the green fence. I'm not sure whether the green fence has actually fallen or not now, but I think certainly things have got tighter in terms of quality in China as the domestic market in China has started to produce a lot of recyclables themselves. There's a demand for greater quality, and obviously more quality materials coming in from elsewhere. So, but Ranjit, in answer to your statement, Ranjit, yes, I mean, obviously export of RDF to Europe and export of other materials to you know, outside Europe under the green list is going ahead. Yes, that is the market at the moment.
Interesting. Stephen, anything to add?
No, it's, you know, it's just very much that. So as an operator last year, we expected certain prices for recyclates. They started at that, and then as the requirement to increase quality, you know, was made even tighter, it fell away, and so you lose that element. It's something that operators have to be very careful of if they're taking this into account as part of their business plan.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And coming to the standardization. Is there a specific calorific value or a specific standard that that the buyer expects? And also, how do regulatory bodies in the UK distinguish between different grades of RDF? Stephen, maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, it's very much driven by the requirements of the end user. So, an energy plant A may want a calorific value of X. Energy plant B may want it of Y, and therefore, if you try and make it all the same quality, you're going to hinder some of those end offtake users because it will not suit their process. I think from my personal viewpoint, where we should be focusing is that if the end user wants a certain quality and it can be manufactured to that, that's fine. What we need to make sure then is that the logistical steps from manufacturing it to getting to that end user are all consistent, so that there is no issue to do with the production from flies, from odor, from causing litter. If we make all of that part as standard and high quality as possible, then you eliminate a lot of the issues that we've seen. Having an end user specification should be down to that particular process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'd add to that. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think standardization of logistics and storage and baling and wrapping certainly could be better. I mean, to get over some of the odor issues and leakage issues if you've got bales with quite a high biodegradable content sitting around. I think in terms of calorific value, I think if you're talking about the general, I guess, moving grade incineration market, I think the demand for tight specifications is not really there, to be honest. I think as long if you're producing if it's coming from household waste, for example, I think if you're broadly between the sort of, let's say, 9 to 12 gigajoules per ton CV bracket, or even sort of 8 to 14, it's broadly acceptable. It can be blended. We may start to see more penalties coming into contracts. I've certainly been party to some contracts, and those being pretty loose as long as you're within a certain CV envelope. I think where things become a lot somewhat different, and I'm sure Stephen knows about this as well, is that when you're talking about SRF and tighter specifications, be for cement kilns, but also for some, I guess, more industrial plant or I guess fluidized bed plant, which are linked to manufacturing facilities that sort of seem to demand or necessarily demand a tighter fuel spec, relating not just to CV but also particularly chlorine. Yep. In that respect.
So let me ask. So how's the price of the RDF decided? If there's a huge window in which people can accept the RDF. Anyway, who wants to go first?
It essentially comes down to a commercial decision by the receiving plant. They know what they have to achieve. They will put a price into the marketplace and see whether they get uptake at that price or whether they have to alter it. So as a producer, we would talk to 3 or 4 potential off-takers and see what price was most advantageous for us, linked to the specification that we could manufacture for them. So for them, it comes down to a commercial decision, and you then look at your own numbers, your production costs, as Adam was saying, the baling, the wrapping, the logistics, and you see what's going to work out best for you as a producing company.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And does do the UK regulatory bodies have any way to standardize or any way to distinguish between these different grades, or do they?
I mean, I think discussions certainly I've had with the Environment Agency. I can't talk in too much depth about them, but I think the view of the agency and possibly DEFRA is that. They think the market should decide. I mean, I think Stephen said it's horses for courses. It depends on a commercial decision as to what the requirements for a particular feedstock, or RDF will be, and that to a large extent sets the price. For example, you may if an operator thinks, or a supplier of fuel thinks it doesn't have a great control over the CV and its fuel, it probably won't be willing to sort of get tied down to a particular tight envelope on that CV in terms of the contract. If on the other hand, if another operator or fuel supplier thinks, well, okay, I'm pretty confident my process, I can produce everything at 11 gigajoules a ton. As I said, I don't think chlorine comes into it much for RDF, but with a certain chlorine content, let's say, then they may get a better gate fee for that, because they're providing, fuel to broadly a specification, which means that the incinerator operator in the Netherlands or wherever knows exactly what it's getting. It knows whether it's got to blend that fuel. It's got more confidence in that fuel, and it might come down to the shape of bales, however their handling is, etc., etc.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And what are the environmental impacts? I know the environmental impacts change depending upon which waste-to-energy plant or which final plant accepts the waste. So how do you assess those?
Well, I think, in terms of receiving plants, most of them are regulated anyway, either through the Waste Incineration Directive or other forms of permits. So it's that the environmental impacts there are very well controlled. Where we have been less successful is the production side and the logistics side. Adam was saying you have bales, they could have a high biological content, which leads to a lot of potential leachate coming out, which can be odorous. It can cause problems with surface water. You can get flies. You can get litter. All of these other environmental impacts that should be addressed through operating permits within the UK, which are issued by the Environment Agency, and operators need to maintain certain standards. They shouldn't be having a negative impact on the environment, and that's where we've got to really make sure that we're picking that up. We've seen recently in Sweden, for example, one of the ports preventing or stopping the import of RDF because the bales weren't sufficiently wrapped enough and they were breaking apart and causing litter within the port area, so they've actually stopped it. So people are trying to clamp down on this, and there are standards in place and they need to be enforced.
Mm-hmm. Adam?
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I think just following from what Stephen said, I agree pretty much with all of that. Really, I mean, I think what's critical. Not sure about the Swedish one, but I mean, in some cases, for example, if bales are stored too long, that can affect the integrity of the wrap, and then causing problems like we've had in Sweden, when essentially the process can be sound, but it's just they've been stored too long at the port side, let's say. I think just to take a slightly different tack, if we look at we've done a fair bit of comparative analysis over the years, life cycle assessment work, looking at export of RDF versus treatment or incineration within the UK. I mean, I will say, again, I've used this term, it's sort of horses for courses, but some of the work we have done, I mean, there's some key points to draw from that. I mean, one important one is that transport is a minimal impact when taken alongside. I mean, I should say as well, I'm talking in terms of CO2 equivalents, carbon dioxide equivalents, or climate change, particularly here. Transport impacts are pretty minimal when compared with emissions from the process itself, so the burning of that residual waste or RDF. In many cases, if you have RDF going to a high efficiency combined heat and power plant in another member state, if you compare that with processing at a sort of incinerator in the UK, most of which, not all of which, most of which do generate electricity only, as a whole, those two scenarios, so export of RDF to a combined heat and power plant versus domestic treatment of residual waste, that electrical option can be environmentally preferable to the domestic option. Again, it is horses for courses because you do have CHP plants in the UK, and if you have an equivalent CHP plant, exactly the same plant, then the UK option would be slightly preferable because there'd be no transport costs associated. Albeit, again, I mean, a lot of exporters would argue that you are backhauling RDF across to other member states, and therefore certainly the shipping emissions shouldn't really be counted within that. But that's all, again, it depends on the particular case.
Interesting. And coming back to the waste crime, we have only another 10 minutes. We have probably 2 more questions and then the concluding remarks. So the first question, coming to the waste crime, both of you mentioned how these criminals collect gate fee, but they don't perform the service. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And is there a system to track RDF or waste from the collection all the way to disposal? I'm asking this question because Abu Dhabi in UAE was implementing a system where it could track waste, and it said that that's similar to the system in UK. So any thoughts on that, Stephen?
Yeah, no, it is tracked, and you can actually follow it through, and an organisation will use the transfrontier shipment to set the framework within that. Each of the bales is labelled, so it's got an identifier. You're able to follow it through the system. The problem gets or happens when you do as much as you can with your duty of care as well to understand what's happening and where it's going, but you still get companies that will take it and then do nothing further with it. So I know of 2 examples with reputable large waste management companies that were caught out that way, but they went and recovered their material and then put it back into the system and dealt with it responsibly. They were not going to let that impact upon their reputation. So it's important people take steps like that. But if you are doing it in good faith, you've done all your checks, all your duty of cares, it may go somewhere, and then that company decides they're not going to process it further. So you have to go and find what they've done with it. So it comes down to having to keep following up and finding out. It does come down to checking on it, and some people just decide they're not going to check any further.
Interesting. Adam, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think duty of care is key. I mean, I think there are limited means. I mean, the Environment Agency has been significantly underfunded, as have many institutions or organisations within the UK and the world over the last 5 to 7 years due to austerity. Certainly, the EA with greater budget could probably do a lot more within its existing powers to combat waste crime of this nature. As I mentioned, we've made some recommendations, or the RDF group has within its report, I guess, as how I don't think we're suggesting we throw the baby out of the bathwater, but some tweaks to the existing powers, perhaps increasing those in some areas to stop the current unscrupulous practices that are happening, and which I think I think we've agreed, certainly Steve and I was called, which are are mistakenly linked to the practice of RDF export.
Interesting. And
just if I could just cut in, one of the things that we've done to support this, for example, with Ricardo, is we've carried out audits on behalf of local authorities, for example, to follow all their materials through from start to finish, so that they have a very clear picture of what's happening to it. And that type of practice, be it for commercial operators or for local authorities, needs to be standard practice. They need to follow it through.
Interesting, very interesting. So finally, what do you think are the opportunities for new businesses in RDF export and import? Adam, maybe you can start.
New businesses. I mean, I guess it would have been good to enter the market as a new business probably 3 or 4 years ago. And some organisations have grown massively on the back of the market, the export market. I won't name anyone here, but you've got some pretty new players. There's publicly available data on who's exporting at the moment, but some of them have grown into pretty significant businesses. Are there space for new operators? I mean, I'm sure there are, in terms of those which are. I think if we look back to the market 4 or 5 years ago, we had a lot of people who were almost acting as brokers, within the market, and some of them not acting, and I guess not acting in the best way always, and perhaps we did see sort of a sort of maturing of the market. So we've got more organisations now, rather than broking, are actually trading and taking ownership of the waste, rather than just broking the deal between the supplier and the off-taker. So I think the market, it's a very competitive, price competitive market. If you can offer a good service, whether that's logistics or baling and wrapping, if you can offer a cost-effective service, I think there's still some growth to come in the market. I don't think it's going to grow quite as quickly as it has the last year or so, but there is still some growth in the market, and above all, we're talking largely about C&I waste, commercial and industrial waste, being exported, which contracts tend to be 1, 2, at best sort of 5 years, albeit we are seeing the occasional 10-year one. So it's quite a turnover of contracts, so quite an opportunity for new businesses to compete for contracts year on year, rather than the local authority market, which is slightly longer. Sorry, Stephen, I'll let you say something before we have time to end.
No, I'd just say I completely agree. It's a very price-driven, solution-driven market, and if a new entrant can come in with a different solution or a better solution that's cost competitive, then they will take market share. I think it might be interesting to see over the next few years how many local authorities, as they come out to re-tender on some of their residual waste contracts, how many will look at RDF export as a long-term solution. We know there are 1 or 2 continental players that are interested in doing direct deals with local authorities, and we know there's at least 1 or 2 authorities have exported RDF to help them in the short to medium term. So I think that will be interesting, but overall I agree with Adam, it's going to be driven by the C&I market, and it will remain a very price-sensitive market.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adam. Yeah.
Just one final thing. I mean, yeah, I agree on the local authority market side of things. I mean, we're supporting one overseas organisation in bidding for contracts actively in the UK at the moment. A number of local authorities, again because of austerity, they are keen to look at the export. So some listening may be aware, when we have procured a framework contract for Wales, effectively via Pembrokeshire local authority, which is already exporting RDF, but that framework is open to other local authorities within Wales, where they can call off. There are some domestic processes of residual waste on that framework as well, but it also includes a number of overseas organisations which can be procured their services pretty easily off that framework. So we expect that to grow considerably, I think.
That's interesting. Hearing about the local authorities getting involved, that's really interesting, and we should all watch how that evolves in future. So any final concluding remarks, Stephen?
Yeah, I think the RDF export market is here to stay. I don't think it's going to disappear. I don't think it is going to grow as rapidly as it has done, but we need to make sure that the right controls are in place, that duty of cares are being followed, that the process is checked so we don't have any environmental impact, and pick up those that are doing unscrupulous practices. So I think it's here to stay. We need to drive the overall quality up in terms of how we do things, but it's going to remain a part of our landscape, and it's going to remain an interesting and changing part of it.
Adam?
Yeah, I'd agree with most of that, all of it really, in terms of standardisation of logistics, baling, etc., etc. But I also think, as a concluding comment, RDF export, the value that it gives to most importantly, local authorities who are increasingly using and looking at the services, they're getting a cheaper gate fee, which is important for UK PLC and the public purse. I also think export allows the UK in many areas and regions to actually leapfrog some of the lower rungs of the waste hierarchy. by the fact that if you're a local authority, for example, you do not need to procure a long-term facility and effectively fund a new facility and guarantee waste to that plant in the long term, which means that you can use the export market whilst you increase your rates of recycling. So you're not locked in effectively to a particular contract and facility in the long term. You can play the export market or increasingly the domestic energy from waste market as we get more capacity online, rather than sort of locking yourself in, which gives that flexibility. And to sort of increase recycling rates towards potentially the 65–70% rate that we will need to achieve by 2030 under the revisions to EU legislation, the Waste Framework Directive, as part of the sort of circular economy package that's being consulted on now. Okay,
thank you very much, Adam, and thank you, Stephen. Thank you everyone for watching the discussion, and our next panel discussion will be on culture, consumption and waste management, and that will be next Wednesday. So look forward to seeing you there, and thank you again.